Okay. Seventh question goes back to you, Karen. People want their state government to be publicly accountable. What do you consider sufficient in terms of accountability?
Open book. I think we need to hold our legislators accountable. We need to have them tell the truth. We need to have them be accessible. I think that's probably it.
Okay. Question to you, Julie.
I'm going to take a few seconds to respond to her previous answer. It indicates the issue, she's mentioned in several forums, the issue of IT consolidation in state government. The Office of Enterprise Technology under Government Plenty took up this issue in quite some depth. And moreover, just this last 2 months, the Dayton administration has completely consolidated all the IT enterprises throughout all the agencies in Minnesota. So if Karen was aware of what goes on in state government with regards to reform efforts that both parties have undertaken, she'd be aware that IT consolidation and modernization of the sector has been a top priority for a long time, and it has been implemented in this last year. In terms of public accounting, there's both when you're in the legislature and when you're in the community. At the legislature, we have one of the finest legislative websites and information systems in the country in the state of Minnesota, where the public can access, audio, visual, of every meeting, every forum, minutes of everything, be able to view the House and Senate in session, all of that, receive public notices of meetings and so the public can come and view them and ask questions and have public hearings. In addition, legislators need to be accountable in their communities. They need to regularly hold public town hall meetings that the public notice is given from through the press, which I did throughout my legislative career on a regular basis. They need to invite the press to these meetings. They shouldn't just be posted to the people who are their supporters. They shouldn't be at a private business that's known to be antithetical to the other party. They shouldn't have campaign volunteers running them. They should be public meetings by the legislator to speak to all their constituents and be available to answer any type of question in a public forum with the press and anyone else who'd like to be there present.
Karen, opportunity to rebut. Yeah.
Thank you. Out here in the private sector business world, the state's website is horrific. If the state were a business, it would be failing, because every single day I'm dealing in technology, and even the campaign finance boards, where you have to file every donation you get and every expense that you spend, it takes one person about 8 hours to file 5 pieces of paper, because it's not QuickBooks, I can tell you that. And so the former Representative Bunn may think that it's a fabulous website, but she's not working out here in the business world, and it would get an F.
Julie, opportunity to rebut.
Short rebuttal to that one. I wasn't referring to state websites. I was referring to public accountability for the state legislative websites, which have been won national awards as being one of the best in the entire country. I completely agree with you in terms of many other websites that supply the needs of the private sector in this state. We are way behind many other states in having licensing, business permitting, access to business information available to the public. I helped author bills to try to redress that and bring us up to some of the standards in the other states when I worked with the Small Business Caucus, but it also requires an investment in some funds that some in our state were not willing to make at that time. But we have I agree with her that our other sites that serve the public need to be upgraded and meet the public needs more effectively.
Karen, rebuttal or no?
I'm done with that
Good.
one.
All right, next question goes to Julie first. Under what circumstances would you favor increasing taxes?
As I alluded to in the previous tax question, I believe that we have a long-term structural deficit that's inherent to the makeup of our taxes, the mix between property taxes, state property taxes, sales tax, income tax, and corporate taxes. These commission reports that I referred to earlier reflect what my general philosophy is going forward, which is a mixture of having a major tax reform that lowers some of our business taxes. I have always supported and voted for a lowering of the corporate tax, and also believe we need to adjust downward our commercial industrial property tax. At the same time, we need to broaden the sales tax base and perhaps also bring the rate down to modernize it with the role that services play versus other products in our economy today versus decades ago when we first designed it. Doing those combination of things will bring additional revenues in net into the state under most of the analysis that was done of it and the analysis proposed by those commissions that I alluded to, which was Governor Palente's Tax Reform Commission, Minnesota Tax Association, and the Budget Trends Commission.
Karen?
No, again, I'm going to say no. We don't need to bring in any more revenue. We already are spending we're already bringing in $60 billion in a biennium. So we don't need to bring any more tax dollars. Again, it's a spending thing. So we really need to look at where we're spending our money, where we can look at the budget, where we can streamline services, where we can save money, because we don't need to bring in any more money at the state.
Okay. Next question goes to Karen. How do you propose we avoid a state shutdown similar to what happened in 2011?
My degree is in communication. It's not communications, it was communication and all the different ways of communicating with people. And I think I am really, really good at that. And if you do elect me as your senator, I am very good at getting things done. Everything I've done in my life, I have a track record, my resume. I wasn't allowed to bring any campaign literature, but I go to my website, housleyforsenate.com, and you can see everything that I've done. I do think it was unfortunate that there was a government shutdown because communication just broke down. I think that's what, in families and relationships and everything, you need to keep communication open in order to not have catastrophes happen like that. So I think I would be an asset at the Capitol to keep those communication lines open.
Julie?
Excellent question, and we just heard the primary reason for the shutdown was we have mostly at the Capitol now kind of extreme elements of both parties. The moderates have been either purged from the parties or unelected by the electorate in the last few elections, and this has been a trend nationally as well. Because of that, we had that high-level conflict. Not only do we have a shutdown of almost 3 weeks, but we had the worst possible financial outcome of the shutdown. Over $3.5 billion was borrowed to fill the gap instead of actually balancing the budget. So it was a failure of both parties and of leadership. The only way to avoid a shutdown is to be willing to work bipartisanly and to have hope in mind before you arrive at the Capitol about what the nature of the problem is and hence what the possible solutions are. Ms. Housley has just stated multiple times that it's only a revenue problem. We have no structural deficit because of the aging of our population. We have no problem with huge increases in eligibility for health and human services and nursing home payments that continue to throw the budget out of balance. We continue to cut higher education as a result of that. So she appears to have already made up her mind on one side of the equation. So once again, we're going to have a no new tax in Ms. Housley and others, and then we're going to have a governor who only wants one kind of tax, which is a top-tier tax on the wealthiest.
Karen, rebuttal? I'm sorry, Julie, I thought you were done. Keep going. Okay, sorry.
And so what we really need is the public to elect policy-oriented people rather than partisan people of both parties who are willing to actually do the study, who are willing to actually listen to nonpartisan experts and their analysis of the problems and what the potential solutions are, and are really willing to hear that based on facts, based on real evidence about the nature of our problems, and then come together with courage and with independent thought of their two sets of partisan leadership to make the courageous step to propose real solutions to those problems, not the sound bites, not the Band-Aids, not the gimmicks that continue to get us into this situation over and over again.
Again, sorry I interrupted you, Julie.
No
Karen, do you want to rebut that? Do you have any comments on that?
It is a spending problem, and when former Representative Bunn was in office from 2007 to 2010, when she got to the legislature, she was handed a $2.2 billion surplus. And when she left the legislature in 2010, she turned over a $6.8 billion deficit. So that is a huge, and since then, in the last 2 years with the Republican majority legislature, we've turned that $6.8 billion deficit into a $1.2 billion surplus in the same economic times. So it is a spending issue. We don't need to raise taxes again.
Julie, rebut?
Well, first on the issue, what occurred when I was in the legislature, it was during the Great Recession, and the state revenues coming into the state fell from a little over $36 billion to $6 billion. So the missing $6 billion that I've just been attributed to full responsibility for was because of the recession in the United States. Secondly, in terms of the current supposed surplus, there's only a surplus on the books because the economists who forecast it got it off. The legislature left it at zero, but it wasn't really at zero. They borrowed $3.5 billion to make the books stack up and pushed it off for us to pay down the road and push it into borrowing on our school districts. So in terms of what we have to do, it is both a revenue and a spending problem. And the spending has to do with the growth in demand for services by the disabled and seniors in our population. And people of good faith and of good intentions of both parties over the last many decades have provided some very good programs for our seniors and disabled in the state. We're better than many parts of the country. And right now, that portion was growing the most in state government, which we'll have to address going forward. So that's a spending issue.
Karen, any rebuttal there? All right, we'll go on to I believe our 10th question. Are there any issues that you disagree with your political party, and why? Julie, you're up first on this.
Well, I think I've just alluded to a very large one. The head of my party, Governor Dayton, has been pushing for a top-tier tax. I do not support that. I support a different approach to modernize our tax system and providing more stable revenues going forward. I do not think Minnesota on business taxes or the corporate tax or even a higher income tax should be an island that is not competitive in the United States. So there are many different qualities we look for in a tax system, and fairness is one of them, and there are different ways to look at the issue of fairness. But on this issue, I think a different approach, an approach that's more conducive to a positive business climate in Minnesota going forward, is the better approach and the one I've been talking about for many, many years.
Thank you. Karen?
I do want to say that she disagrees with Governor Dayton on the top-tier tax, but in 2007, she did vote for that top-tier tax on House Journal 6556 in 2007 to make Minnesota the third highest tax rate state in the country. So I did want to point that out. As far as what I disagree with my party, I will say my husband and I both grew up in South St. Paul, and we were born and raised Democrats, and we were sure we were Democrats until we were 35 years old and we were doing an online quiz, and all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh, Phil, we're Republicans. So I had no idea where the Republican platform stood, and then I believed of myself as an independent because I didn't want to ever go over to that side. But I am pretty much in line with all of the Republican views, but that's not to say they're going to push me around. Nobody's ever been able to push me around in my life, and I'm not going to listen to the Republican Party at the Capitol if they tell me they want me to vote one way or do this. I'm an independent thinker.
Julie, rebuttal?
The rebuttal is that I have voted for a top-tier tax once in my career. I did not vote for any tax increases my first 2 years, so 2007 wasn't the date. It was in May of 2009. It was in that final standoff between the governor and the legislature over balancing the budget after the $6 billion deficit. The top-tier tax I voted for was a blink-off top-tier tax. It was to fill the last $1 billion, meaning it would have gone away unless the next legislature re-voted for it. I voted for it because the other alternative the governor proposed was borrowing $1 billion through the tobacco bonds, which they used this last for the shutdown. Tobacco bond borrowing costs us about $1.70 for every dollar we borrow. They're about junk bonds. Every finance person in the nation said it was the wrong thing to do. We voted down the House floor 132-2. Moreover, it turns out that laying off and cutting another $1 billion from the budget at that time would have created more job loss during the recession than temporarily having the top-tier tax with the blink off. So it's
Karen,
about job
rebuttal?
loss.
Good.
You good? All right,